Okay, welcome back to our World Book Day event celebrating diverse ed authors. Part one was all about inclusive schools, and part two is loosely framed around the umbrella title of inclusive leadership. So I'm delighted to be joined by Miriam Manderson. Miriam, we've not met before. We've had lots of DMs and chats on LinkedIn. It's great to finally meet you.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you as well. Almost in person.
Almost in person. One day it'll be in person. Stuart and I met on Zoom a few weeks ago. Good evening, Stuart. It's lovely to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Welcome, welcome. Tracey, we've been on a podcast together, but it's nice to have you here with us as well.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. I feel absolutely thrilled to be in this illustrious group, so thank you.
So I was going to ask each of you to spend a few minutes really telling us about your book, like how it came into fruition. Stuart, you've unmuted. Do you want to go first? Do you want to tell us about your book? Have you got it there? Do you want to flash it at us?
Well, I do. I have, oops, that way round. I have my hardback and my paperback version of my book. It's there on the back bookshelf as well. So my book came about due to me leaving school as a teacher and then moving into this world of trying to take my message around about empathy and about hope for more young people to understand that was a cornerstone of life, really. And I got introduced to a lovely chap called Ian Downs, who is interested in and has a business around licensing, and we got chatting, and he's like, "Oh, you need to do a book." And he had a relationship with Scholastic, who's my publisher, and I went and had a meeting with them. They had a book they wanted me to write, which they pitched to me, which didn't really sit with me and the things I want to talk about. So I pitched them my idea, and they were like, "Oh, okay, well, we'll think about it." And then a week later, lockdown happened, and yeah, and then I think about a month after that, they were like, "Oh, shit, do you like book you said you wanted to write? Do you think you'd have some time to write it now?" So I was like, "I'm not doing nothing, so yeah, let's crack on." So I started writing it, and it was really therapeutic. It was great to have some purpose during the first lockdown as well, because I really sort of started to feel a bit sort of lost at that time. And yeah, it's been a great experience, and I've done book number 2, and we're looking to do book number 3 soon as well. So yeah, I've got the bug, as they say.
So book number 1 you wrote during lockdown, but book number 2 you wrote during our normal lives. Was it a different process, Stuart, writing in those 2 different regimes, maybe?
Yeah, a little bit, but the second book's a contribution. So I had other people that I was interviewing and finding out bits and pieces from them. So I didn't have all that word count to myself, is which when I think the pressure comes when you've got like this number that you've got to get to. So no, it was a lot easier, this book to write, I definitely would say, than the second book. 100% easier.
Tracey, tell us about your book and how it came about, and a bit about the writing journey and process.
Yeah, so our book, and I say our because I co-wrote it with my brother. You may note it doesn't look like a teacher CPD book, which was entirely intentional. And it's a little bit camp. My brother is LGBTQ, so that kind of feeds into it. So we had an idea, my brother and I, about writing a book for early career teachers. But when we started to look at ideas, what we wanted to say had been said. We wanted survive, thrive, no, survive, all of that. So again, as Stuart said, lockdown happens around this time, just before we'd been to see Six, the musical, in Liverpool, right before lockdown hit, the week before, in fact. And Six, the musical, is about the wives of Henry VIII. It's really postmodern. It's very kitsch. It's not what you think it should be. Right on cue, my son is at the door. Mummy, be 1 second. Mummy, be... Okay, sorry. My son wants to say hello. There you go. There you go. Right, go back to the playroom. Quick. Right on cue. So we'd been to see the Six, the musical. That was thought-provoking. The queens were based on contemporary women. It made us think about queens. What is it about queens? Thinking about chess pieces, thinking about the band. Around this time, I was reading 10% Braver. I finally had the time. Want to sit with Mum? Okay. I finally had the time to finish 10% Braver, which had been sat there. And we just had this idea about addressing some of the injustice that we saw in 10% Braver. Women Ed later became instrumental in this process, but it was really a perfect storm of a lockdown, a musical, and women ed. And that resulted in Teach Like a Queen, co-written with my brother, in which we use the Nolan principles as a kind of ethical model of leadership, which actually is now on the new NPQH, which is an absolute stroke of luck. I'd love to say it was deliberate, but it wasn't. The Nolan principles, and we've put contemporary women in the book as positive representation. So it works twofold, because they're women, but also they are diverse women. So we've got obvious people like Michelle Obama and Jacinda Ardern and Malala. And then we've also got some less obvious women like Kim Kardashian, Meghan Markle. And we look at how women can win at leadership and still be authentic and still be true to themselves and still have families and work-life balance and the opportunity to work flexibly.
Just tell me before you go on mute, how about writing with your brother? Like we had two co-author pairs in the last panel, but I'm imagining that a sisterly brotherly relationship, there could be some spats sometimes, Tracey.
Yes, and there was tension, Hannah, because I was obsessed with this project in a way that he wasn't, and that was where the tension was. So I was writing, and I couldn't get it out of me fast enough, and I wanted him to look at it with that same intensity. But actually, the way that he works, there are good things about the way that he works. It's just not the way that I work. But my vision of writing a book with the other half of me is safe to say is not how it happened. Although I do think when you read it back, it sounds like one voice, but it isn't actually. It's two separate ones.
I love it, and I love the play on queen, sort of like women wearing their crowns, but also the kind of the gay queen kind of icon as well.
Yeah, we talk about drag queens actually in the opening, because we're like, isn't it interesting that men will commandeer this persona? Thank you, darling. Will commandeer this persona in order to be empowered. So is there something in this about putting on a character that might fit certain situations, it might fit certain contexts, but just it's an interesting concept in terms of gender stereotypes, gender roles, gender power, that actually men draw on women to be an empowered version of themselves. And my goodness, isn't that interesting? So it is camp and it doesn't look like CPD, but that isn't to say it hasn't got any substance to it. But I have to say Women Ed were absolutely instrumental in bringing the process to life. They wrote the foreword. They were a very early backer of the project. So by the time it went to peer review and it went out to Routledge, who published it, we already had them in our corner. And my goodness, has that been powerful.
Brilliant, Tracey. Thank you so much. I'm going to swing the mic over to Miriam. Miriam, what's your story with your book? I love the title. Tell us about the title as well.
Brilliant. I'm really happy that you love the title. I have to say, I feel very honoured to be on this panel with all of you, what I would call established writers and authors. So here is my book, From Hood to Headship. I'm glad you like the title, because rightly or wrongly, some people would probably have something to say about the use of my word hood, but actually that's where I hail from, North Wheezy. And, you know, Tracey talked about authentic leadership. That's me. I am an authentic leader. I aim to be all the time. I still look at this, all 250 pages, and think, did I write that? And then I look at some quotes and think, oh, yes, I remember doing that bit. I remember the slog as I wrote those words. So, well, my book comes about because I've always journaled, really, and something we all have in common. I was a new head teacher, September 2019. You know what I'm going to say next, don't you? A few months later, lockdown. So that happened. And I'll be honest with you, I wrote the book because I was told to, because people knew about my journey to headship, to get to headship. And many had said, gosh, you should write about that. You should write about that. And I just put it aside. I wrote the book also because I realized that I was facing these challenges, and it was a kind of acknowledgement that I need to record this and make something of it if I ever get the chance to, right? So lockdown was a blessing and a curse. And for me, it was a blessing because not only did I write the book, I trained as a Zumba teacher as well. I was making good use of that lockdown time, right? But also, hailing from North Wheezy, I recognize that, you know, it's not common. It's not a story that everybody shares. I do hail from the hood. You know, you wouldn't walk your dog there on a dark night on your own necessarily out of joy. You'd probably have a few people with you. So in the area that I spoke about. So that's another reason. And I wrote it because I love challenges. My husband says I've got undiagnosed ADHD. I can never keep still. I've always got something on the go. So I wrote that because of that. And it came about because I went to a friend's book launch, and there was a new publisher there, and I got talking with her. And she asked me, you've got a book inside you? I know you have. And at that point, I didn't want to say anything. And I thought, right, when the lockdown came, I thought, let me try this, because I had spent hours and hours. If there are any head teachers out there, you know what pain I was going through. Not only was I new to Headship, who had led a school in a pandemic, and all I was doing was reading thousands and thousands of really exciting DFE guidance. Honestly, that were not teaching me how to lead my school. Remember, I said authenticity. So I wanted to do things my way. Anyway, I needed to pull myself away, and I thought, right, this is my moment. If I don't start now in this lockdown, when there are, not the rushing around in the school building, I never will. So I sat down, and I can touch type. So I put my fingers on the keyboard, and I thought, let me just see what happens. Honestly, that's exactly what I did. And I just said, even if I type gobbledygook, I'll read back the gobbledygook and I'll unpick it and I'll see what it's supposed to say. And the next thing I knew, I was writing one chapter and another. And I thought this book would have about 6 chapters. It ended up having 17. I had lots to say, lots to say. They're not very long chapters. I've been told it's an easy read, not to say that it's too basic in vocabulary, but it is accessible, I would say, to absolutely anyone and everyone. And as I was writing, everybody gets writer's block. There were moments when I thought, I'm fed up of this, or I'm bored, or, I need to stop. Or I got to a point where I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to play author anymore. It's not fun. But I was in too deep. I'd written about 75% of the book, and I just needed to keep going. And my husband and my boys, I'm a parent of 2 boys, so we all have that in common as well, parenting, who were like my mini authors, and had to sort of pretend they were really interested in the bits that I used to read to them and say, what does this sound like? How's this? Mini editors. But the hardest part, I think, was when I'd finished the book, and it was the proofreading and the editing part of it. Oh my gosh. That stage, I just wanted it finished. But I had a brilliant editor, and I have to say the publisher, she'll kill me if I don't mention her, Winsome Duncan of Peaches Publication. She gave me the rocket I needed to keep going and make sure that it was a finished product. After attending her session, which started off being face-to-face in a hotel, and obviously had to move online because of the lockdown. After her workshops and things, she made sure it was finished. And my editor was absolutely marvelous, making sure what I put down matched my ethos and what I wanted. My voice needed to come through this book, and it was about my challenges getting to Headship. And yes, there was one point in my senior leadership life when I actually thought, hang on a minute, is it because I'm Black? And that I speak about that in the book. I tried to avoid thinking that way and just, I believe in a meritocracy, do well, get where you need to be. But there was a point where I had to question, and that pivotal point I mentioned in the book. So my editor was really good at making sure that I conveyed my voice through that story and that journey to Headship. So that's
Brilliant,
me.
Miriam. So massive thank you for joining me tonight. You can all go and enjoy your dinner now. Put the TV on. There's going to be a very short transition with a slide, and then I'll be back with part 3. But thank you very much for joining me tonight.